welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Douglas Show. Pleased to welcome my guest today, NFL insider Jason LaCanfora. Jason, how you been, buddy?
I'm good, man. Hope you're doing the same. I'm going to wish you a happy new year, even though it's probably past the point where I'm supposed to do that. But big 2024 for all these Commanders fans. So I'm hoping you guys start getting a front office and coaching staff and ownership that is worthy of the support that they get from the legion of people who live and die with them. So here we go. Hopefully it starts the ascent begins.
The fan base is waiting to breathe again for a while. We'll get into the Commanders, obviously. I'd like to start doing a little bit broader look at the league before we do that.
Sure.
Interesting news before we got on the podcast today. It's Mayo in New England. Sounds like he had a clause in his contract that had already been predetermined. It was more of a when, not if. Were you surprised at the time? A turn of the guards. Have you been surprised, Jason? I mean, Nick Saban out. We got the Belichick out and Pete Carroll out. It's a dawn of a new day.
Yeah, it is. Coaching, I guess, is becoming increasingly a young man's game. I think that'll be the case in Washington. The one that surprised me the most is Pete Carroll, just because of where that franchise is in terms of its stewardship. And, most people in this league think by 2026, the Allen family's not going to own that team anymore. And that at some point in 2025, that transaction may come to pass, which had a lot of general managers and personnel people just kind of assuming, right, or just kind of thinking, well, if it is closer to the end and they've had a lot of success with Pete Carroll there and Pete Carroll's closer to the end, then maybe the Allen family and Pete Carroll thing, right, sort of that all dovetails. And when he'll be gone when they sell the team, but do they really want to conduct a coaching search and go through all that if they're going to sell this thing in whatever, 18 to 24 months? It turns out that, they want to mix it up. And Pete Carroll's been there a long time. He's one of the most successful, impactful coaches in football history when you look at what he's done in college and pro. But I think the difference between him and Belichick was probably Belichick's defense was still pretty legit. Pete Carroll's defense has been not so good for a while. The problem with Belichick is he's not just the head coach / defensive coordinator. He's the everything. And the roster stinks. The quarterback development stinks. The coaching staff stinks. Gerard Mayo, all that aside, like if you look at how Bill Belichick has managed his coaching staff since Tom Brady left, it leaves a lot to be desired. The Patricia Joe Judge thing, bringing Bill O'Brien back, like without Josh McDaniels, that thing is never really, and certainly obviously without Tom Brady, that's been kind of a disaster on that side of the ball. The inability to identify talent at tight end and wide receiver, the forays into free agency, the Jonnu Smiths and
where do you
Hunter
think he
Henry
ends
and
up?
all like.
Where do you think he ends up?
I think he ends up as somebody's VP of football operations. I think he ends up like his buddy
Really?
Latuna ended up in Miami as the football czar. I don't think I've been reporting on this in the Washington Post since October.
Yeah.
And the people I talk to in this league who I think are pretty smart, pretty well connected, they just don't see a match. Now, could there be something else that happens? I mean, the Seattle thing, a lot of people didn't think was going to happen. I don't know that they go from a 70-year-old to a 70-year-old. That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
He needs 15 wins to beat Schuler.
Could
right?
Jerry Jones do it?
He needs 15 wins to beat Schuler.
Yeah. I'm not sure of the exact total, to be honest with you. And frankly, I don't think that's going to matter to many owners.
Well, yeah.
Like I don't think they're going to be like looking at it like, oh, well, how much does he need? Like before we throw him a parade. I don't see it. Like even some people, like I think, if Mike McCarthy's team doesn't show up this weekend, I think he's absolutely gone. But I just think that's a bidding war between Seattle and Dallas for Dan Quinn. I don't think he goes to Bill Belichick. I don't think Bill Belichick wants Stephen Jones picking his players for him. Like, I just don't think that makes sense. I don't see the Spanos like, I don't see him answering to John Spanos on player personnel, on salary cap, on budgets. Like, I don't see him being dictated by the owner's son in with the Chargers what he can and can't do. And I also don't see the Spanos family giving him $15 million a year and total control of the franchise. I don't see that as a fit either way. People are talking about Atlanta. Look, I do think Atlanta will finally hire a coach with head coaching experience, something I don't think they've done since Dan Reeves. But is it Bill Belichick? Who's Bill Belichick's offensive coordinator? Josh McDaniels? Like, I don't know. Is that appealing to Arthur Blank? Like, what have they done at the quarterback position outside of Tom Brady?
Not much.
Like Justin Fields and Bill Belichick. Is that going to save the day in Atlanta? They've got pieces on defense for sure. It was a good defense. I'm sure Bill Belichick could build on that. But like, I don't think Rich McKay wants I don't think Rich McKay wants Bill Belichick in that building for 5 seconds. And I know Bill Belichick does not want to have to answer to football guy Rich McKay to get money to sign somebody, to get money to bring another coach in, to get money for, Ernie Adams or whoever his new, psyops guy is going to be. I could be wrong. People I talk to the league could be wrong. The process has only just begun. I don't see it.
You mentioned McCarthy possibly out in Dallas. Do you think if the Eagles bow out in round one, there's major shakeup there?
Well, there's certainly the possibility for it. I mean, there's going to be uncomfortable conversations that have to be had already about the constitution of that coaching staff. Why did we make the decisions we made? Why did we let some people leave this organization? How did we come to the decision to replace them in this way? We're going to need, I don't think Brian Johnson's back as their offensive coordinator, and we obviously know they'll be hiring a new defensive coordinator. They're going to be looking for multiple position coaches. If you're doing all that, then does it make more sense to just start over or to find these guys who all fit with Sirianni to try to keep that, get that derailed train back on the tracks? And we know that the standard there is pretty high, right? That owner and that general manager, they want to be competing at the highest level. They don't want to be, collapsing in the second half of the season, having players regress at every position group, having no real discernible strength on offense or defense, losing to the Cardinals, losing to the Giants. Really could have lost to the Giants twice. Tyrod Taylor starts the first game. They probably lose to the Giants twice in a 3-week span. They're big picture guys. They don't get caught up in the overall record, right? They're going to dig down to the front, the finest granular microfiber level of that organization and say, are we where we need to be? And is the coach the guy we think can get us back there or not? The other thing that you're looking at now too is if you keep a guy now who you're not really sure of, and every year we're like, there's not that many candidates. If you pass this year, 10 dudes are getting hired, 9 dudes, whatever the number ends up being. So now we're going into next year saying, has there been a bit of a brain drain? Are there 2 or 3 guys that we think we could get right now who could do what Sirianni does, or maybe even better? And a year from now, how many of them are still there? Not to say there's not other people, but the Eagles will have cold, calculated discussions about where we are and where we need to go. I'm not 100% convinced that Nick Sirianni, they will find, is absolutely positively the guy to coach them, especially if both sides of the ball perform on Monday night the way they have the final month of the season.
Let's take a look at some of the guys that are on the Ravens right now. Defensive coordinators getting a lot of looks for the head coach. I think maybe he's my preference for head coach for Washington. The offensive coordinator should be getting looks if he's not already. And of course, we know that the associate head coach, defensive line coach is getting looks. Who do you think ends up making the best head coach? And will all 3 of them get jobs this year?
It's possible. I'm not sure. I think Anthony Weaver will be a defensive coordinator somewhere next year. I don't know about a head coach, but whether it's here in Baltimore or going wherever McDonald goes as his defensive coordinator or just going somewhere else as a defensive coordinator, he's certainly going to be back at that level. I'm not sure about the head coaching part of it. Like we were just talking about the Eagles. If the Eagles do move on Nick Sirianni, my theory is that they pounce on Mike Macdonald. I think Mike Macdonald would be like, he'd check every box for them. I just think that would be an absolute kind of guy who that owner and that GM quickly fall in love with if they're not already in love with him. And if you want Mike Macdonald, you got to get him now. Like he's getting one of these jobs. Right. I think the resume has everything you look for. The way he moved up in an organization that prize stability and has been competitive to, pretty much year to year. Studying under Harbaugh, who cut his NFL coaching teeth in Philadelphia, and who's starting to spawn a little bit of a family tree of his own. That's going to be appealing. The fact that he was a part of sort of different kinds of defenses here, then went to Michigan, which that program obviously being looked at in high esteem right now, and did what he did there. And then the other Harbaugh brother couldn't wait to bring him back here when they moved off of Wink Martindale. And then he had big shoes to fill there, and he came into his own in terms of putting his stamp on this defense. He endured some adversity the first half of last season for sure. He started to find his voice with the players, with the media, just in how he presents himself. His confidence, you could see it start to soar through last season. And yes, he's analytical. He's incredibly smart. He sees the game from the coaching aspect and the personnel aspect. I think he has a chance to be McVay-ish on the defensive side of the ball. All the stuff they said about Brandon Staley, this guy might actually embody. This guy might actually be that. I know I talked to Sean McVay after about a week after the Ravens played here, and before I could ask him any of the things I needed to talk to him about for my column, he would not stop. He's like, this McDonald guy, dude. He was talking about him as he's an equal. This guy is a difference maker. I don't want this guy in my division. Who do you think's hiring this guy? I don't want him in this division. So, yeah, I think the Commanders, as this thing, gets into the real stage after the division round and you can actually talk to people, everybody you want to talk to in the flesh, not just over Zoom. I have a hard time thinking Mike Macdonald is not one of the 2 or 3 guys at the end of this who they're most enamored with. I think they're going to have plenty of competition. But I think the Bob Myers of the world, the people who've just been involved in hiring people, picking people, trying to project upside and potential and growth as a human being, as a leader, as a coach, I think he's going to resonate pretty strongly with them too. And whichever GM they pick, I think it's going to be Adam Peters. I have a hard time thinking Adam Peters wouldn't be looking at a Mike Macdonald as well and saying that's a guy I could work with and do some we could get pretty good pretty quickly here with a guy like that. So we'll see. The other guys, we didn't mention. Commanders?
Did you say that you think Peters for Commanders?
I've been hearing it since before the process started that he was going to be a finalist. All the work, the advanced work they had done on him looked pretty sparkling, pretty sterling, and he'd be a tough candidate to beat. So we'll see how ultimately plays out. And really, either guy, I think will. You could look at a McDonald, just their profiles, and say they look like the kind of people who could work together. They're at similar parts of their career. That might be something we put together, and we're good for the next 15 years. And that's not to say you couldn't say that about Ben Johnson and some of these other guys as well. And again, the process, who is the most impressive, who does the owner feel the most simpatico with, we don't know all that stuff yet. And then, Todd Monken. Look, the Jets should have hired Todd Monken when they hired Adam Gase, and they know it.
Correct.
And there were people on that staff who badly wanted to do it, and ultimately, the GM and the owner, went for the Gase thing. That franchise has continued to stumble since. Todd Monken, what he did at Georgia, Todd Monken, what he's done. He's got head coaching experience at the collegiate level. What he's done in year one with Lamar, changing that offense around, and they're still top 3 in yards per play, top 5, I think, in yards per pass, top 5 in yards per rush. Lamar's going to win another MVP, and just turned 27. He's going to do it in a very different fashion than the first one. There's a lot to like there. Whether he gets one or not, again, kind of it's awful early to try to say. But if not this year, in the coming years, yes, I think Todd Monken's going to have an opportunity to be an NFL head coach.
Will the Raiders bypass on Pierce to sign Harbaugh?
I think that would probably be the only guy they would do it for.
Right.
I know Mark Davis has had a thing for him for a while in a similar way they had a thing for John Gruden for a long time. I'm not sure that this deal will close. I'm not sure it'll ultimately be a total fit. I think at some point Mark Davis also, he spent a lot of money on coaches, and it's not just the head coach. Like, this is like, if Harbaugh comes back, he comes back as maybe the highest paid coach in the league, and guess what? He's going to have a couple coordinators who are going to maybe reset the market. That probably all 3 coordinators, and then position the coordinators making that much, then all the rising tide for all the position coaches and quality control and everything else, and like who's his preferred GM, and is that a fit? And am I changing the whole building? And so we'll see. I mean, I don't know what more Antonio Pierce could have done. And I think, Antonio Pierce versus the field, excluding Harbaugh, I think Antonio Pierce is in really good shape. But we know that this owner has, been a star chaser.
And Davis is still paying
took over for his daddy.
And he's still paying the relocation fee.
I mean, the Gruden thing is still right. The Gruden thing is still in litigation. I mean, obviously, McDaniels is not getting a head coaching job anytime soon. I mean, so there's not going to be any significant offsets there. Like, if he comes back as a coordinator or whatever, and you're paying a lot of his people. Like, Dave Ziegler's not getting a GM job. Like, you're not going to get helped out by, any other teams on these salaries to any great degree. So now maybe he just doesn't care because they built him a stadium for basically free. They raised the value of his franchise exponentially from very little doing of his own. I mean, you'd like to think he's learned from some of his mistakes, but some of these guys never do. As people in DC certainly know.
We know a little bit about that. It's super early to be talking about such things, but we're here, so let's do it. This is one of the better quarterback classes in a while. The teams at the top of the draft actually need quarterbacks. Let's start, before we actually discuss some of the top quarterbacks, let's discuss what you think they'll actually do at number 1 with the Bears, with Fields. Is like this 50-50 split on my timeline, right? Where it's like, well, they kept the GM, they kept the head coach, so you got to keep the quarterback. You don't want to reset everybody on the last year. Head coach is in a lame duck year. The other thing you hear is, well, you can't put Fields through the 4th offensive coordinator in 4 years. You've got to move on. I think the biggest thing is you get to reset at quarterback more than evaluating the talent. I can see a team with Fields and all these extra weapons around him and how exciting that might look. But the way that the pay structure is set, it's almost impossible not to want to reset there. What do you think happens at 1?
Well, I think the final thing you said will carry the day. It's a chance to, it's like, do we want to go through what could be an awkward and twisting negotiation with Fields to re-empower him under this new coach who's never worked with him before and wasn't a part of selecting him? Like, do we want to go down that road? Because if you keep him and you hire a new coach, like, we're not just picking up a 5th-year option. You know what I mean? Like, if you're representing Justin Fields, you're like, well, wait a minute. This kid's put up with all the crap you put him through. All these guys who you're now conceding weren't very good at their job, right? Starting with Nagy, right? Because that was originally where, like, he was supposed to be the guy for Nagy. Like, so now you want to keep him around. You're not going to trade him somewhere where he could get a new contract, then okay, then you need to, right? Like, so who's the comp? How are we doing this? Where are we going? Like, so you could go down that road, and like I believe in Justin Fields, but like that's going to be pretty expensive. Like, that's not going to be easy. That's going to be the first. You're going to have a hurdle, or whatever. Maybe hurdle's too strong of a word, but you're going to have an obstacle. You're going to have an issue that new head coach, bam, has to deal with immediately day one. Or you trade him, you get significant value for him, and the new coach comes in with the quarterback, Caleb Williams. Like, that's
what do you think the value is for Fields?
And again, this is one I've been reporting on for months.
What's the value
I mean, I
for
think
Fields?
it's ultimately, it may not be a first round pick. Well, it's first round value. I mean, whether that's in a first round pick or that's in a collection of picks. I mean, I think it's first round value that could move up if he achieves certain things. There will be a lot of teams interested in Justin Fields. I mean that there'll be a healthy market, more than healthy enough for them to get what they think will be fair return, and that plus the pick they have after Caleb Williams, plus all their normal picks, plus the surplus, and now another surplus from Fields from what they did last. Like that's what's going to happen. I mean, I would be really fairly stunned if anything other than that happened. And whether Fields is in Las Vegas, whether Fields is in Atlanta, whether Fields is in Pittsburgh, plenty of teams will be on the line with Kevin Warren and Poles and those guys. I think there'll be a real competition for Justin Fields' services, because not everybody is going to be in position to reset.
Right. If we assume that it's Caleb that goes one, and I know that we're getting like a little prospect fatigue, it feels like, because we're now starting to hear people say, "Oh, well, maybe Caleb Williams won't go one." Assuming Williams goes one, who do you think goes two? And will Daniels be enough to do enough at the combine and some of these all-star games that he'll be able to get himself into that conversation for one or two? Is he the guy that skyrockets more than everybody else?
Certainly could be. Again, I'll just go back to my reporting on this at the Post. Like, I talked to a lot of people about these kids probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago as the college season we were getting into sort of bowl season. Is Caleb Williams absolutely positively going to be the first overall pick? Like, I wouldn't bet my life on it, but the way this played out, with Chicago, I think it would take a certain, probably steeled, proven GM to maybe go a little bit and lean into door number two, whether that's Daniels or May. I'm not sure that this scenario in Chicago is going to be it. Like, if you're moving off of Justin Fields, you're probably taking the guy who is I can't say consensus is too strong of a word, but someone who has looked like a 1-1 for quite some time, albeit there's going to be questions about the deal in the stands with his mom. There's going to be questions about not talking to the media, the painted fingernails, whatever. But I think with the right representation, he can address that easily at the combine and put it behind him and put that stuff to rest. But yeah, the kid from LSU, a lot of people think he's got this even the more elite, if everything comes together upside than even Caleb Williams. And there's some who think day one Drake May might actually be a little bit safer because you're not worried about what are the press conferences going to look like. Some of the things you may get yourself worried about with the Caleb Williams aren't there with May. Either way, I think probably it's 1, 2, 3 in some order. I was hearing the Michigan quarterback, even though I watch it, and I'm like, I don't really get it, but I'm also not an evaluator. Enough people told me that high-end evaluators love that kid, even when Harbaugh stopped throwing the ball, or actually it wasn't Harbaugh, right? Because he did nothing wrong, but I believe he wasn't coaching on the sidelines. It was someone else, even though everything's totally above board. But regardless, while they were taking the ball out of his hands against teams like Maryland, I still had people telling me, nah, he's a first rounder. And then with them obviously doing what they did in the playoffs. And I get it. It was still had a lot to do with the ground game. But if you have that offensive line and you have that group of backs, then yeah, the coach is going to lean into it. So anyway, I think 6 of them are going in the first round.
Who do
and some people think it could be 5 in the top 10. I mean, it might be 5 in the top 10. Maybe.
Way too early to know. What's your best guess with the Commanders at 2? You think they'll go Drake May?
I got to know who's running the team and who's in the front office. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't.
Let's.
It's Drake May. If it's Drake May or it's Daniel, it's one of those two.
Right.
Because again, I do think Chicago will go Caleb Williams. Yeah, I don't know.
Let's take the last couple of minutes to run through some of the playoff games.
Okay.
I still got you.
Yeah.
Let's take the last couple of minutes to run through some of these playoff games for the weekend. Browns, Houston.
Well, I'm banking on a lot of points. I like the over here. I lean to the Browns. Earlier, at some points in the week, I kind of thought maybe the Browns would run away with it, but I just think ultimately their superior experience throughout the coaching staff and at the quarterback position will carry the day. I don't think Joe Flacco is going to Houston worried about their home field advantage, or, scared to win a playoff game in that stadium. It's that nothing phases him. And it will be a jump up for CJ Stroud. And Stroud didn't play in the game against the Browns the first time. And I don't think he'll be rattled, but I do think Jim Schwartz will have a really good plan for him. And Stroud's been better against zone than man, and Schwartz is playing more man than he ever has before, over 40% of the time. He's blitzing more than he ever has before. The Denzel Ward injury is probably a big deal. I mean, I think it is a big deal. I think that would have been the guy doing the job on Collins. But I just worry about the Texans not being balanced enough offensively, the Texans not having enough multiplicity in their passing game. It's going to Collins with the tight end, right? I mean, that's just kind of where they are right now. With Woods banged up and Tank Dell out. I think the Browns are going to go bombs away against the secondary that was not great against defending the deep ball, and that I think was 28th in the league in yards allowed per attempt. I just think it's going to be a little bit too much for the Texans.
In a matchup that I don't think anybody saw in the first round, you got the Dolphins versus Kansas City. Who do you like here?
I like Mother Nature. I just think this is going to be dictated by the game conditions, and these are 2 under teams for me. They're really right now led by their defense. They really have been, even Miami, since about week 9, week 10. That's a Miami team. You go back to the game these teams played in Germany, and they were, especially on the Miami side, at way better health than they are now. That was a game played in the low 20s. Biggest play of the game was a defensive score. I think this was shaping up like that regardless, and now you add the element of cold, extreme cold. I mean, you look at Tua when games kick off at 70 degrees, below 70 versus above 70, there's a huge chasm in his win-loss percentage there. And now we're talking about, well below 0 with the wind chill. It's a track team that's built for South Florida, and this is the exact opposite. And it's a relay team that has maybe one of their sprinters at full strength. And I don't even think Tyreek Hill's at full strength, but Mostert definitely ain't. I mean, he hadn't played in 3 weeks. He hadn't practiced that much. Waddle, whatever. I think if he plays, he's a decoy. They've also lost their speed on the edge, perimeter-wise on defense, without both starting edge defenders. Without Xavier Howard, Jalen Ramsey hasn't looked right to me in 3 or 4 weeks. So that's a lot to overcome, even against a stripped-down Andy Reid offense. So I think the Chiefs win that game. I think, Pacheco gets the ball a bunch. The Dolphins have to be committed to the run game. But I think Patrick Mahomes wins this game. I think it's probably low scoring.
Green Bay at Dallas. Feels like we've got a bunch of these recently.
I like Green Bay here. I'm definitely taking the points, and I've also sprinkled on the money line. Like, LaFleur's the better coach. LaFleur has no pressure on him whatsoever. Like, if there was any lingering questions about can this guy do the job, without Aaron Rodgers, he's proven it. Jordan Love has played fearless football for 9 weeks now. I don't think going to Dallas, where, it'll be loud, but, like, it's not like going to the black hole. It's not like going to the dog pound. Like, it's just not. Like, it's not that kind of crowd. And it's also a crowd that knows that if this team doesn't start hot, like, they know what's coming, right? Like, everybody knows what's coming the longer this game stays close. The later it gets and the closer it remains, who's really backing Mike McCarthy in that spot? Like, so if this game is close at halftime, I will double down and live bet it again for the Pack. If this is within a touchdown, like, Green Bay's more balanced offensively. Green Bay definitely has holes defensively, and they've got to find a way to pressure Dak at least a little bit. Like, I get all that, but Dallas's defense is predicated on having a lead, and if they don't, and if they've got a two-headed monster at running back, Green Bay's offensive line is legit. And even if this kid throws an early pick, and he hasn't thrown one pick in his last 9 games, I don't think it's going to stop LaFleur. Like, he's building for the future. He wants to empower this young man and put it on him. And he's shined. They've been playing playoff games for 6 weeks now. So, again, if they can keep it close in the first half, I believe the Packers win the game in the second half. They'll manage the game better. Their quarterback can match the other quarterback throw for throw. The Packers are very live for me.
And what I think this is my favorite matchup of the weekend, the Rams-Detroit game. I think the Rams sneaky have as good a chance as anybody to run through this thing. I don't think they're getting enough attention paid to them. But I also really like what they're doing in Detroit. So I'm curious your thoughts on this game.
Yeah, I mean, there were 2 teams in the NFC that I thought could go to Santa Clara and on their day beat Kyle Shanahan. These were the 2. Obviously, that field's going to be whittled down this weekend. So part of me is like, it's a shame they're meeting this early, but it's it's also pretty delicious with Dan Campbell's group getting there and then having to face Stafford in their first playoff game. I like the Rams here. I just think that they are so well built to exploit the deficiencies in the Lions defense, and the Lions answer in the second half to try to compensate for their defense. I know they're getting a slot cornerback. He hasn't played all year. Like, I don't think Gardner Johnson is the difference in this game. Like, I just don't. But the Lions have struggled defending 11 personnel. I think they've given up the 3rd most touchdowns to 11 personnel, a high yards per attempt. Sean McVay, since their bye in the middle of the season, is in 11. Like, we all know he plays like they're an 11 personnel team. Like, most years they're around 89, 90%. He is in 11 personnel over 97% of the time since their bye week, over 97% of the time. The problem is you don't know who the tight end really is. You don't know who the slot receiver really is. Like, you don't know who's playing what position. Like, just because Puka Nacua is allegedly a wide receiver, he's running a lot of routes and doing a lot of responsibilities of a tight end. Same with Cooper Kupp. They got Demarcus Robinson going now. Like, there's so many interchangeable parts there, and they've got a great offensive line. And they can pound you in the run game, but they kill you in 11 personnel and they kill you in play action. The Lions aren't great at any of that, and the Lions have struggled against the slot to defend the slot all year long. And McVay has so many interchange; he can just rotate guys in and out. And they're really healthy, and they got to play last week with a bye. And Dan Campbell decided to play it like it mattered. And I don't think Laporta's playing in this game. I don't think Amon-Ra St. Brown is 100%. I don't know about Reynolds, if he plays at all in this game. I don't think Matt Stafford's going to care about going back to Detroit. You got a Super Bowl winning quarterback and a Super Bowl winning head coach. So I like the Rams here. I think it will be a high scoring game. But I just think the Lions secondary on a fast track in a dome, a great day to play pitch and catch. I just think that will ultimately be their undoing. They'll probably blitz a ton. They'll look at what the Giants did in the second half of that game. against Stafford. But I mean, the Rams still should have put up 30 points in that game. So I think the Rams prevail.
Eagles, Bucks. Yeah, there's two left on the slate. Eagles, Bucks, which I think a month ago everybody would have thought Eagles in a blowout. I don't think that's the case now. What are your thoughts on this one?
I bet the under as soon as it came out. I just think it is what it is. I don't really buy either quarterback right now. Neither quarterback's healthy. I don't know that either quarterback is really going to push the ball downfield that much. These two played a low-scoring game. It was early in the year. I get it. But, like, that was one of the best rushing games the Eagles had all year. Like, how are they not leaning back into that? They ran 41 times, I think, in that game. How are they not thinking, let's run 45? Because back then we thought we had a defense. And now we know we don't. And we also know that Matt Patricia don't have the answers to the test. So I can't imagine that this isn't Todd Bowles and Nick Sirianni saying, oh, you think you're going to run it 42 times? I'm going to run it 45 times. You think you're going to hold the ball 33 minutes? I'm going to hold the ball 36 minutes. Like, I just think that's what it is. Baker Mayfield, as we're talking, still hasn't practiced all week. He couldn't push the ball downfield last week. He'll probably still get it to Godwin a lot. As much as I talked about the Lions can't defend the slot, the Eagles don't even pretend to try to defend the slot. So who wins? I don't know. It's a coin flip. I don't have a strong feeling on who wins this game. I mean, the Eagles defense is so broken. But, like, is Baker Mayfield banged up going to beat them, you know? I just think Rachaad White gets a lot of the ball. It's probably small stuff, short stuff to Evans and Godwin, relying on Yak. And I think it's probably a pretty ugly, low-scoring game. I guess I'll say Eagles, but I say that with no great conviction.
This has just been confirmed. Your thoughts?
What's that?
Adam Peters to Washington just confirmed as we were talking here.
Oh,
what are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, I'm not surprised. You look at that franchise, what they've done. You look at, right, like Houston dipping into that a year ago and what that's done for the Texans franchise, kind of going into that John Lynch, Shanahan family tree and how quickly it's worked with a rookie quarterback there. And we already talked about where they'll be picking. I just think it's going to be a tough resume to beat. I'd heard as soon as Bob Myers, I heard that name, I had people in the league reaching out to me like, hey, like he likes Adam, like, even though he's not an NFL guy, like he's got some ties to Adam Peters. Like, I'm just telling you, Adam Peters is a name you're going to hear right away in that search, and he's going to be at least a finalist for that job. So no, I mean, young, analytical, been around really smart people. Was a part of a hiring in San Francisco that, remember, that was like a little bit weird, like John Lynch, you know what I mean? And he wasn't really, I think, originally the first choice there. They couldn't get some things to come together. They had the coach kind of before, like that whole thing when it came together was a little odd. And then when they ultimately picked Lynch, it was a little odd. And it's like, are these two going to be able to work together? What's that going to be like? And it obviously has turned out to work quite well. So, no, not surprised. He's one of the people I thought would be getting a job in this cycle. The one thing that surprised me about this whole GM thing is that Joe Ortiz, who runs the draft for the Ravens, I'm shocked I haven't heard Joe Ortiz's name.
I asked that a couple of times this week. I've been surprised too.
I haven't heard much about Ed Dobbs in Indianapolis. I haven't heard anything about Morocco Brown there. And I hadn't heard anything about Joe Ortiz. And like that surprised me. But like Adam Peters getting the Commander's job, does not surprise me in the least.
He'll be head of football ops, do you think? And I all speculation, I get that, but do you think he will hire a GM on top? In San Francisco, I think Lynch had the head of football ops and GM job, right? Do you think they'll separate that in Washington as more of as they move towards more of an NBA style structure?
I don't know. I think the reality is this was the buck stopped with that. Like, if you have questions, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm sure it'll all come a final say in this title and that title and what it means. I think what this tells me is I don't really care about any of that. The buck stops with this guy. Like when
Gotcha.
when I personally am writing about this team, making phone calls about this team, I'm analyzing this team. This is where, for me, was it a good draft or not? I don't care who's got the title of, college scouting chieftain and GM and assistant. No, this is it. Stops with this guy. This guy's a personnel guy. He's involved in evaluations. He's not just some like cap dude. Like, don't go get a cap dude, and he might have a super fancy title that includes general manager. But for me, the buck stops on Commanders' personnel issues with Adam Peters. That's all. That's
Sure. Do you think that will mean that Bobby Slowick will be valued more in their head coaching search?
Well, there's
Right.
familiarity there, and all along, like even when all this Belichick stuff was going around, and trust me, that was coming from Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick wanted that job, wants that job. It wasn't coming the other way.
In Washington,
people were telling me no. Yes, people were telling me no. Like Harris is not doing that. Harris is going to get two young guys, and he's going to look for synergy. He's going to look for shared traits, but also enough difference that there is checks and balances there. He's not looking for two guys who are going to be, like joined at the hip on everything. Excuse me. So, I think that the McDonald's, the Slowicks, the Ben Johnsons, like that's where this is going. Like I would be really surprised if it's not one of those types of guys rather than someone who's done it before. Two guys who could grow into the job together. Yeah, so he was the name that I thought was going to, obviously they're going to talk to him. They'll probably like a lot of what they hear. It's not where I would go. Like, I think it's a little fast there for me.
okay.
But these guys are all going to have other options too.
One last one before we get up.
In particular.
One last one before we get out of here, Jason. With Peters, it came down to Peters and Cunningham by all accounts as the last two options. Technically, if Peters wanted to give Cunningham the GM job in Washington, it would still be a promotion. Seems unlikely, though. What are your thoughts there, just as far as how that works in league circles?
Yeah, I'm surprised. I think when you're talking about, I would think he's got some people in mind from San Francisco that he's going to want to negotiate with John Lynch and bring a couple. Who can
Martin Mayhew is already here. You don't think he'll stay though, right? They'll move on from Mayhew. Clean sweep of whatever was in the house. Yeah.
Okay. I would think so. Or at the very least, a very different job description than the one he has.
Right. Your Ravens going to make it all the way to the Super Bowl? And if not, why? Who's the stumbling block if they don't make it?
I think they're probably going to face Flacco in the first round. Well, their first round, the divisional round. And I think that's going to be, honestly, a really tough test because of all the familiarity there. Not just even talking about Flacco, but organizationally. Schwartz and Stefanski, like the Ravens are still a little bit of a different thing offensively. And the more you face them, the better chances you have of solving it any given weekend. And they just came here 7-8 weeks ago and won a shootout. So I think if they can get by that first game, then whoever is coming here for an AFC championship game, I think, even if it's Mahomes, Reed, whatever, having to go on the road, Buffalo, whoever it would be, I think would you better be ready to score 35 on that defense, because these guys, whenever they faced a legitimate opponent, they've been way up for it, and they've won those games by 14 points or more. So, but yeah, getting that first one for this group out of the way, and if they do have to do it against Flacco, that's a little bit of a there's a lot going on there. So I honestly think that to me was going to be the trickiest opponent wherever they faced them, as you were just kind of watching these things come together. So we shall see.
All right, Jason, you're the best man. What do you guys got coming up on the radio show today?
I don't know about that. Oh, a whole lot of Ravens talk, that's for sure. We'll continue to talk to some people we think highly of who cover these different AFC teams and how they think they might match up with the Ravens next week. It's all football all the time. So, yeah, if you're interested, you can check us out on the Odyssey app or on 1057thefan.com in Baltimore from 2 to 6 weekdays.
All right, buddy. Appreciate you.
Have a good one, man. All the best.
Yep. Thanks.